welcoming our new director, Eban Goodstein, to BSEP as part of the function of this conference. So this morning we're focusing primarily on sort of his vision for the future and what are the next steps in his program, and BSEP is obviously going to be a big part of that. So I'm going to turn the mic over to him, and he's going to basically take over. We're going to have some presentations and then breakout for the rest of the morning, which should generate some good information. So welcome, Eban.
Well, thanks again, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. It is record-breaking temperatures here in the Northeast. We had some other record-breaking news, which is not news these days, so that NOAA just released the carbon dioxide concentrations, which are up 2.1, 2.4 parts per million over last year. So we're at 386 now, and the bad news is that methane concentrations are also starting to rise again after a 10-year hiatus, and we're not quite sure why, but that's obviously very bad news. What I want to talk about this morning briefly is the work that we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years with the National Teach-In Network. And really just need your help to figure out how we can continue to engage faculty and staff in particular on campuses to in turn engage students over the coming year. The other night after dinner, Penelope asked me sort of, what was my goal? What were we trying to do? And I told her, that I always figured I was going to die in the year 2040 because I was born in the year 1960, and that's nice and symmetric, right? I'd be 80 years old. And that my goal, when I die, is to have been part of a generation or an intergenerational movement that reduced emissions of global warming pollution by probably 60%, let's say, globally by 2040. And I didn't know that was my goal, until a few years ago. Sort of didn't really know, I grew up engaged in the environmental world and caring about the planet and the earth. It's as if, I was handed a mission. And I think increasingly people around the world are coming to realize that history has opened a door and asked us to walk through or not. And for those of us who've been engaged as educators and teachers, in this process of achieving that goal, the next 12 or 15 months are going to be sort of the culmination, or it's going to be the flux point or something of that life's journey. I wrote a book called Fighting for Love in the Century of Extinction, and I wrote it really as a response to Bush's election in 2004, when you had not only Bush's election, but you had Republican control of both houses of Congress. And I was reflecting on, and I've been doing climate education and organizing for, 6, 7 years, and I was thinking, it just doesn't seem possible, right? How could we possibly do what we need to do over the next 10 years, given the political context? On the one hand. On the other hand, it was a reflection of why I was doing this. I mean, why had I gotten so absorbed in focusing my life's energies around trying to do that, trying to somehow be part of a global movement that was going to stabilize the climate. And so the book was actually kind of very personally reflective and was focused on the extinction half of the global warming equation. And we all understand that if we push into the high end of 7 and 8, 9, 10 degrees Fahrenheit, that it's going to be very, very difficult for many poor people in the world to survive. It's already difficult, and that kind of climate change is going to push many communities, many people, many cultures over the edge. But I was focused more on the natural world because we just had studies coming out that were suggesting that solely as a result of habitat destruction from global warming, that by the time I die, there will be a third of the terrestrial species on the planet will be locked into extinction. And then just 2 years ago, the IPCC came out with their latest assessment that suggests that at the high end, we're talking about extinction rates on the order of 70%. And so the book was kind of about what does that mean? What is the world going to be like in the year 2080 or 2090 or 20? And at the end of the day, I mean, as Leon said the other day, people will adapt, and they won't, to some degree, civilizations will carry on, and people will continue to love and have babies and do what they do. But the world will be a much poorer place. And so, from my perspective, we as a generation, as generations, intergenerations, have the opportunity to vastly enrich the future. It's not so much that they will condemn us for what we did, it'll be that they don't even know what they missed. That there'll be so much richness and bounty and possibilities that'll be foreclosed. So that was kind of the conclusion, my own personal conclusion about the reason for the work. The direction, though, to make it possible was politics. So in 2004 and 2005, I was saying, if we want to change the world, then we have to envision the idea of, a clean energy leader in the White House and, clean energy majorities in Congress by 2010. And, and I was thinking, that's really hard. It's not going to happen, but we have to strive. We have to put all our energies towards that. And it happened. I mean, so what's happened is that there is this sort of moment of possibility has opened up. It seemed impossible 3 years ago. And now we're on the verge of accomplishing the first step, right, in this transformation. And I think of it often in terms of the civil rights movement. So, I was thinking, 2005, that's 1960 in the United States, when it was at a point where most people in America by that time, I think, had been persuaded that our system of apartheid, racism, segregation, Jim Crow was immoral and wrong. But people were fatalistic. There was a sense that they just couldn't do anything about it. And that's just the way it was, and that's the way it would be. But then from, the Greensboro sit-ins in 1960, the civil rights movement swept across the country and it culminated in 1964 with the passage of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. So, that's sort of where we're at right now. That's the moment we're at. And I think most people, in spite of what the polls, the way they fluctuate, I think most people get that global warming is real, it's serious, it's bad, but they're resigned to it in some sense. They don't have a sense of how it could possibly be different. We've all been advocating a different kind of a vision, a different sort of a future, and it really hangs in the balance, whether we're going to get that Voting Rights Act and that Civil Rights Act. And Leon said you can't legislate morality. Well, I think we did. In 1964 we did legislate morality. And the consequence was that 40 years later, we had an African-American man elected to President of the United States.